Did you know the best seeds for your garden don't come from the nursery? In fact, the seeds that will create the most robust and delicious fruits and vegetables come directly from your garden. This is because they are uniquely adapted to your growing conditions, better than anything you can buy from a fancy catalog or website. Through the magic of seed saving, it is quite possible to have the garden of your dreams. The best part is, saving your own seeds is surprisingly easy and fun. With a bit of instruction, anyone can become a seed-saving superstar. Let us teach you how in our free seed-saving webinar. Just text SEEDS to 33444 to sign up, or visit seedsavinghacked.org for more information. That's SEEDS to 33444, or visit seedsavinghacked.org.
You're listening to the Urban Farm Podcast, your partner in the Grow Your Own Food revolution. Whether you've just been introduced to urban farming or you're a lifelong advocate, we're sure you'll leave feeling more informed, equipped, and empowered to dig deeper into the soil of your local food economy. With you every step of the way, here's your host, Greg Peterson.
Today on the Urban Farm Podcast, we have Anne-Marie Miller of Bloom Where You're Planted to talk about her experience with urban farming in Texas. Anne-Marie, or Dash for the hyphen in her name, is an urban farmer in Dallas, Texas. She raises chickens and rabbits on less than 1/4 acre. Plus, she has turned her front yard into a large, stand out in the neighborhood vegetable garden. Congratulations on that, by the way. In addition to the farming she does on her homestead, she helped create a community garden, literally from grassy field to thriving garden. What stands out about her little urban homestead is her determined out-of-the-box approach to overcoming obstacles. You can follow her adventures on her little urban homestead by visiting her blog, bloomwhereyou'replanted.com. Welcome to the show today, Dash.
Thank you, Greg. It's really good to be here.
Yeah, perfect. So I shared a bit about you. Can you fill in the blanks for us and share more about the path you took to get where you're at now?
Sure, yeah. Well, me and my sister joke that gardening is in our genes, not just in my dirty gardening genes, but in my genetic genes.
Right.
I say that because my grandfather had this huge garden, and he also had his whole backyard once covered with strawberries, the whole backyard.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, but unfortunately, the garden gate was closed. We were not allowed in the garden. So, yeah, so grandparents everywhere, open the gate. Let them in.
Yeah, no kidding.
But me and my sisters tried to grow a garden in the backyard when we were young, and unfortunately, the backyard was what I call squirrel landscaped.
Oh, yes.
And that means that the squirrels planted nuts, and my mom was always rooting for the little guy, literally in a sense, and so she protected each one of these little trees that came up from the lawnmower. And so it was just, I've been kind of plagued by shade, so it's not conducive to growing vegetables.
Oh, right.
Everywhere I lived, I planted flowers, I planted roses, I landscaped. I love being outdoors, but I never planted vegetables. And can you guess why?
That's a great question. Why wouldn't you plant vegetables?
Well, because my mom was a single mom, and she worked sometimes 1 to 2 jobs, and we ate things out of a box. And we ate canned food, and vegetables for me were just not really part of the equation. I didn't really know what to do with them. So I think it gives me a good perspective on someone maybe in that situation that just doesn't even, they're foreign. They just don't know how to cook with them or anything.
Right.
Don't even know what they are, you know. So fast forward many moons, and 2 things happened. My kids started to have some health problems, some pretty serious health problems, and I prayed about it, and God kind of put before me people that taught me what health was. And there were a lot of varying opinions about what health is and isn't. But the main thing that everyone agreed on was that it was, you know, your diet should be 80% fresh, organic vegetables. So, and then another thing happened. I always wanted to live on a farm my whole life. I think I kind of had a romantic idea of what farm life was.
Right.
I have a little bit better concept what it is now. But and so one night I was talking to God about, my want to have property and live on a farm and have animals. And he said, child, just stop pining for what you don't have and bloom where you're planted.
Nice.
So I decided to do just that. So I went out in my backyard and I tried to grow a garden. What people do in the city is they buy bags of manure and they try to, put it in their garden bed. And so I was doing that, but there's one rule that I live by is you don't pay good money for manure.
Oh, yes, exactly. There's all kinds of it out there.
Yeah. So I decided chickens. If I got chickens, I could have as much manure as I wanted, and I could also have fresh eggs. So what stopped me, I think, was the coop, the building of the coop.
Oh, yes.
That seemed intimidating to me. And I'm kind of an artsy writer, gardening type, and exact measurement really isn't my friend, and you really can't fudge when you're building.
Right.
So I ran across this website. It was The Garden Girl, Patty Moreno. And I'm sure she's moved on. It looks like she's moved on to more lucrative things. But at the time, she was sharing her little acreage in, I think it was just like a fourth of an acre in Boston, Massachusetts. And she built this chicken coop. It was kind of a chicken tractor on a raised bed. And she built it on video. I mean, totally the whole thing on video.
Right.
Yeah, so I thought, this I can do. So I went and got the materials, and I built this thing and was ready for chickens. So we got chickens, and we kind of stopped watching TV and watched the Chicken Channel.
Exactly.
They're a lot of fun, and they were so much fun for my kids, and I really enjoy raising them. But so I took the chicken manure. I'm so excited to have that. I put it in my little garden plot, and you know what? Nothing really happened because I really had no sun in my backyard. And as much as I cut limbs and tried to create sun, there was just really not enough sun. And to complicate the problem, the chickens now would escape sometimes, or the kids would leave the gate open, and the chickens would eat the meager vegetables that I could coax out of the ground, Yeah. So I started looking for a community garden. And I found out that in Dallas, they're kind of expensive to join, and I was surprised. And I thought, well, I can save more money just going and buying these organic vegetables at the grocery store than doing all this work growing them if I'm paying this monthly amount. And so I prayed, because I try to go to the Father about my problems.
Right.
And I opened my eyes, and I happened to be by the window. And I looked out the window, and I saw the church across the street, and they have this huge field that they're on. And so I said,
nice.
Okay, all right, I can do this. So I walked across the street, and I asked the pastor, I said, have you ever thought about a community garden? And he says to me, yes, we're starting one. I've already got this group that's ready to go with it. Would you like to be a part of it?
Oh, my gosh. So I'm getting chills right now. How cool is that?
So we went out in a grassy, weedy field in the middle of summer. And if I could write a book, my first book, I think, would be How Not to Start a Community Garden.
That would be a really good book to write and to read.
Yeah. There was a lot of learning curve there. And, well, there were a couple of planners in the group. There were a lot of doers. And
oh, well, that's good.
Yeah, but the planners, I think they thought they had convinced the doers that they were going to go and, plan like maybe a water source, maybe raise some funds, important things, maybe visit gardens and see how others do it, right? So I think they thought they had convinced the doers, that they would to hold off and that they would plan. And so the planners went into their homes and to their computers probably and started to plan. Meanwhile, the doers did what doers do in the garden. They just dug.
Nice.
So there was a little drama when the planners came back out and they saw the garden site had already been, started. So we kind of met an obstacle and we overcame it. And then we met another obstacle and overcame it. But needless to say, I won't tell you what camp I was in, the doers or the planners, but, I know that my friends are listening to this, and they're saying, I don't know what camp she was in.
Yeah.
She was out there digging herself a garden.
There you go.
But despite our growing pains, today, where there used to be this grassy, weedy field, there is a thriving garden, community garden. But about halfway through our project, the pastor at the church resigned, and they were getting a new pastor, and so we were all kind of a little bit fearful that he would get there and say, well, I don't want a garden, I want a baseball diamond here,
Right.
But he is an amazing man. He's a good man, and he's a great gardener, and he can grow.
Oh, he loved it, huh?
Yeah, we were blessed with that. He can grow some food, that man can. So I pretty much learned everything I know about gardening from Pastor Bruce. And
nice.
Yeah. So I saw how big zucchini is and yellow squash plants got. I was kind of amazed. And believe it or not, at the time, I did not know what kale was. I mean, if somebody had told me to go to the grocery store and buy them kale, I would have said, I don't even know what it is.
Well, I found for myself that that's how I learn. Before I grew broccoli, I had no idea.
Yeah, exactly. Me too.
Right?
Yeah, and collard greens.
Yep.
I mean, those. I remember as a kid getting a little taste of those out of a can, and I think run into the trash can and spit those out.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but fresh collard greens are good. I mean, I put them in everything. They're awesome.
Yeah.
And I couldn't stand cauliflower. And now, roasted with a little oil on it, maybe some rosemary, and my daughter thinks that's her favorite snack. I remember eggplant. My kids thought it was like a purple football, and they threw it back and forth in the field by the garden, and I was like, okay, be careful with that because we're going to eat that later. And they looked at me like, uh-oh.
Yeah. I found that when kids grow their own food, and we talked about this many times on the podcast, when they grow their own food, they eat it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I find that to be true also. Mm-hmm.
So I'm looking, you were our featured farmer here a while back, and congratulations on that. That's cool. And I'm looking through some of the pictures here. And in your intro, you talked about this epic front yard farm. So tell us about that, would you?
Yeah, well, since I had helped create the community garden, it wasn't a huge step for me to do it in my front yard. Mm-hmm. And I have a lot of shade in my backyard. I really can't grow anything there, but it's great for my animals. So we raise rabbits now, and the chickens, of course, and it's nice and cool for them. So I decided, okay, this is where I have fun. I'm going to do it. I'm going to go for it. Mm-hmm. And so I started with 2 raised beds, and, in my neighborhood, if something sprouts, the rabbits come and they eat it. I mean, everything. They eat everything, down to the very nub. There's nothing, that can be grown with the rabbits around. So I had to do a fence. And I didn't have money to do a fence, really, so I got pallets, and I broke the pallets down in such a way, and I painted them white, and I really think it looks like a pretty picket fence. My neighbors loved it. And I put chicken wire on the inside, so the rabbits
can't get in. Yep.
Right. And you really can't even see the chicken wire. It just looks like a picket fence. So.
Oh, it does. So there's a picture right in front of me now on our website, urbanfarm.org, and it does. It just looks like a very nice white picket fence. How cool. I would never have guessed that was pallets.
Thank you.
That is so cool.
When there was the opportunity to put raised beds in it, okay, those can be expensive, to be honest. The wood itself can be expensive, and then to fill them, if I had some stuff here, compost here, and soil for my chicken yard, but I needed amendments to fill them with, and so I thought outside the box, and I got some sponsors from my church to pay for the wood and for some of the amendments that went in the raised beds, and in exchange, I brought them vegetables for the spring season, and I would do season by season. I would bring them vegetables every week or every 2 weeks for the winter season, so I'm still doing that now for the winter season.
Wow. So. Hold on. I have never heard that one before. You basically did a CSA in exchange for your front yard garden beds.
Yes, exactly. Because I didn't have the money to go to start all that. Yeah, and they're enjoying it, and I think they like being part of the whole project,
Wow, that is truly one of the most cool things I've heard on the podcast yet.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And this is why this is a stand out in the neighborhood vegetable garden.
Yes, it does stand out. Yeah, and I had a little bit of trouble with the city. It's not really so much the garden that they have a problem with. A lot of people have plants in their front yard and vegetables, you know, as part of their landscape. But the problem was the rabbits were eating everything. And so I had to do a fence. And what they do have a problem with in most cities is fencing ordinances for your front yard, which I can understand.
Right.
Because, you know, you wouldn't want your neighbors to privacy fence their whole front yard. So we had a little back and forth about that. And eventually we came to an agreement, and it had to be a certain height, so I had to saw a little off. And,
perfect.
And they wanted it more regulated. The picket, they could tell it wasn't, you know, it's not exactly your standard picket fence.
Right.
And so they wanted it more regulated, so I had to replace some of the pallets. And without saying, I couldn't really come out and say, well, these are made from pallets. Oh,
yes, exactly.
So I replaced some, and so worked it out, and they approved it. So I was really glad of that.
Well, so I'm going to thank you for doing that, because one of our big challenges as urban farmers is walking our way through the morass, I'm going to call it, of governments trying to, you know, regulate things. So thank you so much for being a standout and doing something about that. That is huge.
Well, it was really neat, too, the way my neighbors came out to support me. I asked them if they would write letters in support of me and my garden if they felt that way, and they did, and they were all for it. And I've had so many people drive by and say, I've been watching, I'm loving what you're doing.
Nice.
People come up to my door and rang my doorbell and said, I love your garden, you know, and asked me questions. And so I got letters written for the city that just were for my project. And I told them, for every complaint you get, I can provide 5 people that want this. So they took them and they put them on file. So I don't.
Nice.
It was really nice to feel supported by my neighborhood.
Big time. I've worked really hard. So I'm on a street with 21 other houses built in the 1950s here. And I've worked really hard over the past 25 years to enroll my neighbors in this process as well, to get them engaged. Absolutely. And so you've worked with your neighbors. What kind of work have you done with your neighbors to get them enrolled in this process? I mean, part of it was you CSA'd out your garden beds. What else?
Well, I think it really just takes one person on the block to have a neighborhood, you know, party and to get a list of numbers and names. And so we put up a list of houses. We just, you know, drew the houses on the page and had them write their information if they wanted it. And that way, you're more likely to call somebody before you pop over for sugar. Or maybe they left their garage door open, and you can call them and say, you know, did you mean to do that? Should I go close that? And somehow that, knowing each other's names and having the numbers made us, I don't know, it made us contact each other more.
Right.
Yeah, and so we all became, and I have found that when I'm out in the front yard, people are coming by. I'm a lot more accessible.
Isn't that
getting
cool?
To know people.
Yeah,
it is.
Yeah, I have that happen. I had some of my neighbors, I have this dang near a hedge of snow peas growing in my front yard right now. And some of the neighbors and the kids were walking by and they said, what is that? And so I harvested a handful of snow peas and handed it to them, and you know, they were eating it right there on the street. So food is such a great way to connect. And, you know, having a garden in your front yard is a great way to connect with the neighbors, don't you think?
It is, yes. And I'm always taking vegetables, you know, that never hurts.
Yep.
And eggs, that never hurts, you know.
Yeah,
people love
exactly.
that. So.
Exactly. I notice on your website, bloomwhereyou'replanted.com, there's a tab that says Urban Gardening 101. Can you tell us about that blog post?
Yeah, I just wanted to show someone how to do a raised bed and what to put in it and the different options. And also, you know, if you can't afford to do it, the sponsorship idea. Just to not let anything stop you, even if you're handicapped and you really can't do the heavy lifting. You can pay someone on your block. I'm sure there's someone on your block that needs a little extra money.
Yeah.
They can set that up for you. So just not to let anything stop you, I guess.
Yeah. So on Urban Gardening 101, it's 3 steps, and it's basically step by step on how to build out raised bed gardens. Yes?
Yes, yeah. The wood, I make mine 4x8 and just screw them together. And then we have living earth technologies in our part of the country, and I don't know about other places, but that's probably where I would go to get my amendments if I didn't have compost made in my yard.
Right.
But I think one thing that does make a huge difference is a manure source.
Oh, yes.
So if you can have an animal, I know a lot of places around me are really restricted. Don't allow chickens, but even a rabbit, your kids will love it, and you can add that straight to the garden. It's not hot. You can top dress it on your plants. So that makes a huge difference. My garden really took off when I was able to put composted manure in it.
Yeah. Fantastic. Now that was rabbit manure, correct?
Yes, yeah. And I have chickens too, so I'm able to add chickens, but I know some people aren't yet allowed to have chickens.
Right, and that's a process we're going through, isn't it?
Yeah.
So why do you think urban farming is important?
I think in our own small way, we're making a huge difference in the environment. Not having vegetables transported such a long way, and they're healthier for us. But I think in our small way, we're making a difference. But I think if there are 1,000 of us, that's making a huge difference.
Yeah.
That's when it starts to get exciting. And just buying locally, even if you can't do a garden, if you're buying locally from a local farmer that you know with a CSA, then you're providing a market for that. You're providing a market for organic vegetables, and organic vegetables are grown so much differently than others in that the soil is sustainable, it's healthy, it's rich, it's going to last for generations, and that's making a huge difference in the environment, I think.
Absolutely. So recently you wrote an article for Urban Farm U on vermicomposting. Can you tell us a little bit about what that is and why it's beneficial?
Sure. It's basically using earthworms, red wigglers, putting them in a Tupperware bin, so to speak, and damp, and you want newspapers on top and kind of compost on the bottom, and you're going to feed them in that in-between layer. Feed them about once a week with a handful of lettuce or, veggies, waste, whatever you have, scraps.
Right.
And they're going to produce for you this great black gold that is awesome for your garden.
Yeah.
And it's awesome because it's got microorganisms and that are really good for the soil. And so it's really good for your soil health, and it's all about the soil. If you your veggies, you think the plant, what does the plant need? Well, it's in the soil really that you need to boost up to grow healthy, beautiful plants. And so, about every 10 weeks, I take my bin out and I sift out this black gold and I add it to my garden, or I add it to my seedlings that I'm planting, or even pots. But I haven't yet seen the benefits of it because I recently started it, and I've added my first batch to my seedlings, and so I'm kind of watching and waiting to see the difference between the seedlings that have the black gold, the worm poop, if you will,
right,
and the seedlings that don't. So I'm kind of seeing...
You're doing an experiment here, right? So you're experimenting.
Yes, I love experiments.
Very good.
Yes.
Fantastic.
Yes, I'm taking pictures of the seedlings that do have it and don't have it, and seeing if we have a difference here. So we'll see.
Oh, great. So in our pre-talk, before we started recording, you mentioned that you had raised rabbits from baby rabbits to plate. And I know this sometimes makes people cringe, and I like what you said for the vegans. What do you tell the vegans?
just plug your ears and hum for this part.
Yeah, exactly. But, as a culture, we eat meat, and I'm not a vegetarian. So a few years ago, I took on raising some chickens in our backyard from chick to plate. And that was quite the experience for me. It gave me a huge appreciation for healthfully raised chickens and the process that you have to go through. Can you speak about that?
I love raising rabbits. I love my rabbits, and I do. I really don't like to have them in a cage all the time. That bothers me. And so we have bigger pens that we let them out every day in the bigger pens so they can get some exercise, and then they have to go back in the cage for safety.
Right.
Because we've had bobcats and possums and on our property, so they go back in the cage at night. But most of the time, they're out. So I think I might feel differently if it were in a small cage all the time. But anyway, I think it has made a huge difference to us raising the baby rabbits and then learning how to kill them. That was a big deal for me, and my older boys did help, but it really gave us an appreciation for meat, and we eat a lot less meat because you experience everything that went into raising that animal. I mean, it's food, it's water constantly, and we had a really wet spring, so it was slogging through the mud and the wet, whether you wanted to or not, and the cold, and you have to always be available for that animal. And it just gave us a huge appreciation of where our food comes from. I think before, when we went to the store and got chicken, we just didn't have a concept of what went into that, and that life that was that life that was sacrificed so that we could live. And it's really changed my kids' view too, I think, of eating meat. And I hear a lot of great journalists have done a fabulous job about showing how animals are treated in our factory farm system, and it's deplorable and it's disheartening. And I really wanted to raise an animal that had room, and the babies were with the mom the time that they needed to be, and then they had room, and they felt the sunshine on their face and the earth under their feet. And I think that's the right way to do it, and it's just something feels good about that. Yeah.
No, I completely understand that. And I hear you. After I raised the chickens here in my backyard, I'm much more of a vegetarian. It shifted the way I feel just about meat. So I hear you on that one.
Yes. And I'm thankful that I have my boys. My older boys are in Scouts, and they kind of wanted the experience of learning how to kill and butcher a rabbit in case they were in a survival situation, and they wanted to do it. So that was really helpful to have them on board and learning how to do that too. But it was funny that day. Our neighbor came in, and we were right in the middle of rabbit number 4, and this neighbor is never speechless, and we totally rendered him speechless.
Oh, wow.
But it's all good.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so I'm going to shift on you here a little bit, and I want to talk about a time you failed and how you overcame that failure. What did you learn?
Well, on a serious note, I think my biggest failure is when something happens with an animal that because of your error, you either did something or didn't do something. But on a funny note, I do have a story about a time that I considered a huge failure, but it worked out in the end. And that was when I had my chicken coop done, and it was towards fall. I did it in the summer. It was towards fall. So I went to a feed store that I normally don't go to because not all feed stores sell chicks in the fall.
Right.
And this one had a sign that said straight run. So I looked at the guy and my city self. I said, well, does that mean they run straight? I mean, I don't know. And he said, no, that means you're going to get the occasional rooster. And I said, okay, but most of them are going to be hens, right? Because I want eggs. I don't want roosters. I'm not allowed to have a rooster, where I live. And so he said, yeah, there might just be a few roosters in there. And I says, well, what am I going to do with them? And he looked at me like, eat them? But he said, I was not open at that point. I had never killed or butchered anything, eaten anything from my farm. So I said, well, can I bring him back to you? And he said, sure, yeah. And I said, well, how will I know that they're roosters? He said, well, they'll grow bigger than the others, and they'll get saddle feathers. I didn't know what that meant, but I just nodded. Okay. And they said, and their combs and their will get bigger, will be bigger than all the rest. And so I said, okay, well, will I know this pretty quickly? And he said, oh, yeah, in a few weeks you'll see what you have, So I took my kids, picked them out, and they were so excited, and we're raising them and really enjoying it.
How many did you pick up that day?
There was a dozen. We picked out an even dozen. So I went to church the next day, and I asked a friend that I knew was a farm girl. I said, okay, you grew up on a farm. How can I tell if these are roosters? I'm curious if I've got a rooster. And she said, well, pick them up and turn them upside down, and if they have the strength to raise up and peck your hand, if they have the breast strength to do that, then they're roosters.
Oh, interesting.
And so we got, I know. So we got home, and I said, okay, kids, turn these little things upside down. Let's see what we got. And they came back to me and says, Mom, they're all roosters. And I said, no. And they said, well, there is this little runt that, that doesn't have much strength. And I looked, and I said, well, when I was a kid, I raised kittens and dogs. There's always a runt, right?
Right.
So I thought, these all can't be roosters. So, you can kind of tell where I'm going with this, right? That was my hen. Uh-huh. The runt.
And you had 11 roosters.
That's right.
Oh, my gosh. Really?
Yes, I did. And I didn't, I'm kind of in denial. I thought, well, she doesn't know what she's talking about. They can't all be roosters, right, of this one. And so I bide my time, and then eventually, like 4 months later, after I've been feeding them all this time, even my city self can tell that these are roosters that I've got.
Right.
And so I'm thinking, well, I'm not taking him back to this guy now. I've been feeding him for 4 months. No way. What a chicken racket that is.
Yeah.
So I was kind of in denial, and I'm waiting for a weekend that my husband has off, and he can, hopefully help me butcher these things. And meanwhile, I hear, okay, so I wake up. It was still dark outside, and I wake up, and I sit straight out of bed, and I heard this hellaciously loud sound, and I was like, no way.
Yep.
And then there it goes again, and I thought, it sounded, by this time it's the middle of winter, and we have our windows closed, and this is loud. So my husband looks at me and says, you better do something about that. I think the police, he said, I think the police will be here by 9 at least, or 8 maybe.
Right.
And so there I am in my chicken yard, and every time a rooster crows, I've got my coat on, and it's cold, I'm shivering, and I've got a stick, and every time that rooster, I whack it with a stick. You can't do that here. You don't understand. And at that moment, I thought, this is such a failure. What am I going to do? Why do I have these ideas? Why can't I just be normal? Why did I ever decide to get chickens, right? And another rooster crows, and I whack it. So I had to put my big girl pants on and learn how to butcher a chicken. Oh. And that day, because I also learned something else about roosters. They don't just crow in the morning.
Oh no.
They crow all the time. They crow when the mailman comes.
Yep.
They crow when the trash truck goes by. They crow when a dog passes. They crow a lot. They
crow at 2:00 in the morning?
Yeah. So something had to be done really right away. Wow. So we went to the internet, because there really wasn't time to get somebody that actually knew how to do this. And so, we went to the internet, so it was kind of comical. We were running inside and watching on YouTube, and then we'd run outside and do something else, and
Wow. So I'm going to shift again on you. What do you consider your biggest success?
Definitely my front yard garden. Yeah. It felt like a big accomplishment when it got approved by the city. And I guess I just my whole life I've been afraid to be different, and this was really different and out there, and so it felt really good just to be doing that and making a large step in the right direction, I think.
Yeah. What drives you?
I always try to let my Heavenly Father be in the driver's seat, because it never seems to work out when I try to drive my life. So I try to do what makes him smile, and I think whenever we join in community and we do something for the good, I think that makes him smile. And I think when we not only give someone food, like from the community garden that needs it for their family, but we teach them how to do that themselves, I think that makes him very happy. And I think when we treat the earth that he created for us as good stewards, I think that thrills him. And same with the animals. When we treat the animals as they should be treated, with compassion, and we appreciate that sacrifice of that life, so that we can live, I think he's all about that. His whole story and his promise is about that life that was sacrificed for us.
Perfect. So what final piece of advice do you have for our listeners? I
think don't let anything stop you, especially if you feel like sometimes gardening can be an expensive hobby where I live. Yeah. And if you don't have the funds to get started, then get a sponsor that'll be willing to start you up, and then you'll give them vegetables, or buy you a beehive and you'll give them the honey. And I guess just pray and listen and think outside the box. And I think our Father's faithful in giving us ideas that we could never imagine for ourselves.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining us on the show and sharing your experience with us today, Dash.
Thank you so much for having me. It's quite an honor to be here.
Absolutely. And so how can our listeners get a hold of you?
Well, I have a blog, Bloom Where You're Planted, and you can search Bloom Where You're Planted Urban Gardening. It usually gets me there. And I kind of share about my adventures and try to make it amusing, as life often is.
Yes, that is the case.
And teach people in the process and inspire them.
Perfect. So bloomwhereyou'replanted.com.
Yes.
Well, that's it for today. Thanks for joining us on the Urban Farm Podcast. Did you know the best seeds for your garden don't come from the nursery? In fact, the seeds that will create the most robust and delicious fruits and vegetables come directly from your garden. This is because they are uniquely adapted to your growing conditions, better than anything you can buy from a fancy catalog or website. Through the magic of seed saving, it is quite possible to have the garden of your dreams. The best part is, saving your own seeds is surprisingly easy and fun. With a bit of instruction, anyone can become a seed-saving superstar. Let us teach you how in our free seed-saving webinar. Just text SEEDS to 33444 to sign up, or visit seedsavinghacked.org for more information. That's SEEDS to 33444, or visit seedsavinghacked.org.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode of the Urban Farm Podcast. Remember to listen 3 days a week for tips, advice, and resources to help you on your journey with urban farming. You can find us on the web at urbanfarm.org, or send us an email to podcast@urbanfarm.org. In the words of Vincent van Gogh, great things are done by a series of small things brought together. Be encouraged that with each lesson learned and skill developed, you are one step closer in the direction of your dreams.